and welcome to the Sacred Matrix. I'm your host, Lessin, with my co-host, Alex Lessin. This is Revolution Radio Studio B. Our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as a Mad Painter. And we're going to do an Apocalypso panel with Karen Christine Patrick and Russell Scott Brinegar. And we're going to talk about all kinds of current events, the global pandemic, coronavirus, and conspiracy, and all kinds of wonderful things. Dr. Lessin, did you get a chance to look at the show page I created? Been working on it for a couple hours. Anyway, what do you want to say, honey? Go ahead. Take it away.
In these troubled times and the difficulties we're facing, I'd like to read a little selection from Robert Reich, former Secretary of Labor under Democratic administrations, from his book called The System. And it's a chapter, it's sort of the most interesting things, or some of them, from a chapter called Democracy Will Prevail. And I'm going to read it kind of fast, like Amy Goodman would. Robert Reich writes, stagnant wages, near record inequality, climate change, nuclear standoffs, assault weapons, mass killings, Russian trolls, kids locked in cages on our border, and Donald Trump's presidency may cause feelings of doom. But what Robert says is that the strength of this country is our resilience. We'll bounce back. We did it before, and we'll do it again. In 2018, a record number of women, people of color, and LGBTQ were elected to Congress, including the first Muslim women. 18 states raised their minimum wages. So there's positive things happening too. The majority of Americans now under 18 years old are ethnically Latino, Asian, or Pacific Islander, African American, or bi or multiracial. That's the majority. In 10 years, most Americans under 30 will be the majority. 3 decades from now, most of Americans will be diverse. The diversity is our huge strength. It means it will be more tolerant and less racist and less xenophobic. Our young people are determined to make America better. They voted in record numbers in 2018 midterms. The majority of college students today are women, which means that in future years, even more women will be in leadership positions. Now, those in rich, white, privileged, or male positions threaten to, and they intimidate those who are not. They intimidate those who are not rich, those who are not white, those who are not privileged, and those who are not male. And it's time to fight back, Wright says. Trump is America's bully in chief. He exemplifies those who use their wealth to gain power and celebrity, harass or abuse women, and get away with it. They lie. They violate the law with impunity. They rage against anyone who calls them and their bullying. Trump became president by exploiting the anger of millions of white working-class Americans who for decades have been economically bullied by corporate executives on Wall Street as profits have ballooned and executive pay has gone into the stratosphere. Workers have been hammered. Their pay has gone nowhere. Their benefits have shrunk. Their jobs are less secure. Their health has worsened. Trump used his anger to build his political base, channeling people's frustrations and anxiety into racism and nativism. He's encouraged Americans who have been bullied to feel more powerful by bullying people who are even less powerful. That is, poor blacks, Latinos, immigrants, Muslims, and families seeking asylum. The Republican Party works for the oligarchs. It cuts their taxes. It eliminates regulations. It lets some of them profit off public lands and coastal waters, and it slashes public services. Family businesses, farmers, individual contractors, lone entrepreneurs, and inhabitants of smaller communities have much in common with women, minority, and urban professionals. All are paying for the pharmaceuticals, broadband connections, food, credit, and debt credit card debt, health insurance, that much more than they would. Small businesses and enterprises are squeezed by monopolies. Franchisees are trapped in contracts that siphon off their profits. Creditors and contractors are stonewalled by big corporations who won't even pay their bills. See market fundamentalism as what it is. It's a religion that idolizes the free market while masking those in power who have the power over the rules of the game. The laws themselves are meaningless because the large corporations violate them whenever they want. If it's cheaper than paying, they'll just pay their fines and get away with whatever they're getting away with. Trump and other demagogues are masterful at telling big lies backed by the oligarchs' money. People of color are threatened by mass incarceration and mass deportation. Women face now new restrictions on reproductive freedom. The two-party system sucks. It's evolved into an existential threat to American principles and institutions. The American political system discourages strong third party because the winner take all rules squeeze out insurgents. That's why third parties tend to drain off the votes from the dominant party closest to them in ideology or voter preference. Citizenship, real citizenship, requires ongoing engagement, knowing what needs to be done, getting the facts and understanding the arguments, then making enough of a ruckus and organizing and mobilizing others to join you to do what needs to be done. Yes, Reich says, democracy will prevail if we fight for it.
Okay, let's go boy, girl. Karen, Christine Patrick, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Oh, just that was a great reading. And there's so much truth in that. And yeah, the world is just transforming very quickly, very dramatically right in front of us. I hope that what I add to the conversation has to do with trends that were kind of already in play, but we're not coming to the forefront. Economic changes that actually have been building for quite some time. I think a person who I pay attention to who said it really well as far as our current system is, you cannot taper a Ponzi scheme, and our economic system is a Ponzi scheme. It's like Bernie Madoff. Suddenly you just don't have any money. And the only thing a narcissist like our president gives you is betrayal. So that's me for now.
Okay. Russell Scott Brinegar, welcome to the show. What would you like to add?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say that my heart goes out to everyone who's been adversely affected by this, with the loss of loved ones. It was a big curveball that nobody really expected, just came out of left field, and everybody's sort of in a state of trauma or shock over it right now. But as in the case of any trauma or shock or tragedy, there's a chance for a huge elevation in collective consciousness because we now realize everybody on this planet is all in it together. And if that message and that glaring truth is absorbed into the collective consciousness, I think we can come out of this in an improved state where we've rearranged our priorities from a situation where it's every man and woman for himself, a dog-eat-dog world. He who dies with the most toys wins. He spent a lifetime acquiring resources to beat the guy next door into a situation where material goods are seen as strictly utilitarian and that everybody deserves a share of it that was born onto this planet, and completely change our thinking and upgrade the way that we look at this global situation. So it's painful. A lot of people are kind of going bonkers, including myself. In fact, I told my wife, Julie, that this was, I hope we can be each other's therapists tonight, because everybody's all bottled up inside and they probably have a lot to say. They want to get out and enjoy life and The lake that I normally go to this time of year is shut down. 30% of my retirement IRA has just vanished. And I've got friends that have a lot more resources than I do that have suffered really serious financial losses, And I feel for them too. Everybody's hurting economically and psychologically, but I do think there's potential for an improvement overall once we get a handle on this thing. And we realize that pandemics can happen at any moment. We need a pandemic team in place at all times. And the function of government is becoming glaringly obvious too, because I've got friends who are of the libertarian philosophy, no regulations, no government, everybody's on their own. And we'd pretty much all be dying right now if that philosophy were implemented. And those types of philosophies, in my opinion, are based on the ableism fallacy. If I can do it, so can you. Well, that's assuming that everybody's intellectually and physically equal, and that's certainly not the case. There's a big stratum, and everybody, regardless of socioeconomic standing of birth or race or whatever your status in life is, should have an equal shot at just basic happiness. Food, clothing, shelter, finding somebody you love, enjoying the beauty of the planet that we're all born on. And all the astronauts from outer space, one of the big revelations that they had when they came back was they didn't see any borders. They didn't see anything except a unified population on the planet. It's just a blue ball floating out in the middle of nowhere. And they all came back with spiritual revelations about that experience that they had in outer space. And I'm hoping that, plus I've been retired for a couple of years. Now the whole country, I have company. I'm talking to people online that I haven't talked to in a long time because they're usually at work, And it's caused me to reevaluate a lot of things regarding money and the things that are really important in life. So hopefully this is something that's being absorbed into the collective consciousness, and it'll wind up as an elevation of perspective. But I listened to what Sasha was saying, and first of all, I think that's as fired up as I've ever heard him speak. And he's obviously been thinking a lot about this. He's usually pretty mellow, pretty cool. I tell there's emotion invested in what he was saying, and that's great. But I think it's causing everybody to take a second thought about everything they ever thought was true. And, there's this big dichotomy, like there's a split in the country. Half the country thinks Trump's doing a wonderful job and is a great, upstanding, righteous man, and the other half thinks he's demon spawn, and it's like the ones that like Trump are saying that those of us who are critical of the president shouldn't take our check, because we're critical of Trump. And then those of us who are critical of Trump think that they shouldn't take it because we're dealing with an anti-science, anti-socialist president who is now relying on science and socialism to save the friggin' country. That's my contribution for now.
Okay, let me say something. We'll go boy, girl. So there's a wonderful site called Anna's and Nancy's CLV 2019.live, and it was created by a 17-year-old and his friend who's about 16 or 15. And it's a live update about what's going on with the numbers around the planet. So as of right now, there are 726,187 confirmed cases on the planet. Almost 34,000 have died. There are 25,000, this is approximate, that are very serious, and another 156,500 have recovered. But this whole recovered thing is just a myth because they can get reinfected. They're not building up the antibodies that will guarantee they do not get reinfected. So this virus is acting like none other we've ever seen before. Normally you get something, you have antibodies. Well, that's not happening. In the United States, there are a total of 140,000, about 140,500 cases. We have 2,500 approximately deceased. Another 2,600 are serious. And today we are up by 254 new cases. But we're getting more more and more cases every day because we finally are getting some testing in. But our strategy was not to, respond because we, Trump, and I am angry at Trump. Let's be cathartic. I am pissed off at whoever is controlling this planet. My theory is this is intentional. It's based on the information like from George Green and the depopulation bomb and all these things have been going around for the last 15, 20 years that they were planning on bringing the human population down to 500 million or something like that. I'll give you in just a minute, my turn. And hold on, I forgot what I was saying. So I'm angry. I'm angry at Trump, who dismantled the pandemic department. There were at least two trials. There was one when they were changing from Obama to the Trump administration, where they ran a test on what would happen if we had a pandemic. It was clear we were ill prepared. They gave a detailed report about what we need to do. All these things could have been stockpiled, reviewed, because some of these things are not working. They're outdated, upgraded facilities, a whole plan in place. And this was intentional, okay? So people are being murdered. And we are so infected now as a population. We're like, I call it the zombie apocalypse. We are the walking dead. The period where it is dormant, the incubation period of this virus is not 14 days. They're saying to go and self-quarantine for 14 days. The new information coming out is that it is 4 to 8 weeks incubation. So people are going back out and infecting and back out and infecting. So I've been researching this like my life depends on it, because it probably does. And so the second round of these trials of what will happen began in January of 2018. So this is not like it's 3 years old and, I forgot. No, this is current. The same results. We're ill-prepared. So this is the Illuminati intention to bring down humanity's population, and I want to look at that in this show. Why? What do they get by taking the world's population down, I don't know, half or a third? We don't know what's going to end up happening. And then the other worst part, and I'll pass it to Sasha, is that it mutates. So by the time it got from China to Italy, the virus had already mutated. It piggybacks on bacteria. So you jump on a cruise ship and you jump on a plane or any other public transportation, a bus or a train, they are full. They're like a petri dish of bacteria. It's a major distribution for this bacteria. And my theory, let's go into conspiracy, is that it was created intentionally. So let's look at that and other things, but I'm going to pass the talking stick to Dr. Lessin. Go ahead, sweetheart.
Okay, the Congress's, especially the Senate's response to this crisis was to give vast bailouts to corporate executives who will then buy back their own stock eventually. They didn't have to borrow from the U.S. government. They had collateral. They had airplanes for collateral. The cruise lines that were bailed out aren't even registered in America. And they also have property that can be used for all kinds of things as they need to borrow from the taxpayers. Mr. McConnell and the repugnant Republicans that we should repudiate rapidly have basically done another big giveaway that's going to keep our kids and our kids' kids in debt for a long time to come. And Mnuchin can waive this. You can't make a profit, Mr. Trump and other corporate executives. He can waive that. He has the ability to waive that. And as far as the checks that are supposed to go out to ordinary workers, like in the various industries and people out of jobs, if you have a bank account that's got a refund and you haven't changed your bank account or moved, then you can get a check, Secretary Mnuchin says, in 3 weeks. Otherwise, if you move, but you can prove all these kind of things, you might get it in 5 weeks. And beyond that, there is no provision for all the people that are desperately in need of some kind of help. This is another bailout, and the Republicans forced at the very last minute. Lindsey Graham wanted to make a means test to make sure that people didn't get money that would make them not want to work anymore. I say, get rid of the Republicans, get rid of, Mitch McConnell and these people that are killing you.
All right, we're angry. Over to you, Karen, and you can talk about whatever you want. We're cathartic right now. This is get it off our chest. Go.
Well, I don't know. I'm past the adrenaline stage of what we're doing for our household. I've noticed I've been listening to other radio programs that people kind of went to we had our shut down a bit late in New Mexico. We're kind of spread out and kind of more, I don't know, we're in a different phase of it, I think. The other day I went out to pick up groceries. I'm wearing a mask because I've got virus-sensitive asthma. I'm not messing around. And I was kind of a trendsetter. I know if people saw me, they put their masks on them. So they had them. So I'm like a fashion trendsetter for wearing a mask. I noticed if they saw me, then they put theirs on. But yeah, we're kind of not all the way there yet. Although I think we'll be there. So then, our family goes into, Brett and I have been through many different kinds of disasters, and we've been through as caregivers. So we've had to sort of think twice as hard about a lot of different things. We put in a greens garden. I recommend everyone plant a freaking garden because we are not going to have people picking our fruit. We're not going to have picking our vegetables. We're going to have disruptions in the supply lines of food. There's even talk about state to state checkpoint, very strict checkpoints between states. There's just no way to know what the heck's going to happen. So if you can take responsibility for yourself, one of the first things we ordered was seeds, and we started planting seeds, that produce their own seeds because we got a good long growing season here. We planted seeds in the next door elderly neighbor's yard as well. So, but there are limitations on what you can do for yourself. And, what Russell was talking about, capacity or ability to survive it. It's true. People do not have equal opportunities to be able to do different things like plant a garden. I have a very robust man named Brett who's going to do that for us. We can't pull ourselves all up by our bootstraps because we have, I think if you're not in the 1%, your capacity to survive things has been reduced considerably. All of a sudden we have 500,000 less millionaires because their wealth is in paper and in investments is disappearing very rapidly. And the top levels of our government only have one play in the playbook, and that is throw money at the top. And they do this from very long-standing policy. And I'll go with a personal story. I grew up in a right-wing conservative environment, and I was sent to a right-wing conservative college, and I was literally sitting in the second row behind the professors when Milton Friedman, who is the Reaganomics economist, was speaking. He's a little short guy. They had to have him stand on a box to see over the top of the podium. And he had laid out what's called supply side economics. And basically is if you deregulate everything and you throw money at the top of what they call the job producers or the job creators and capitalize the top, and you just keep doing it, that will trickle down to the rest of us. And we're discovering that is a bankrupt idea because everyone ignored the other half of what he said. And he said that there needed to be a reciprocal program, his version of a basic income that he was talking about, and y'all know I talk about basic income all the time, is that it would be a negative income tax. So if your income dropped below a certain amount, you would have functionally above the poverty line some kind of income. And they did not institute that. And so that part of what we're suffering from economically, besides just the dynamics of the virus, is the fact that we don't have a floor to the bottom. You can go all the way down and all the way out because there's no floor. They did not implement the other half of what he said. Now, all of a sudden, if you are a person who follows the basic income idea or basic minimum needs income economy, it's suddenly everyone's going, now, wait a second, what did you say then, Becker? That was kind of a good idea. So the people who were dubious of it even just weeks ago, literally weeks ago, are now finally understanding what a basic income does. And they don't recognize it if it shores up an individual, but they damn well recognize it when the whole bottom falls out. And so that's the problem. We don't have a floor to this thing. We don't have support and capitalization. So people say, the idea of a basic income is a socialist idea. It is not. It is a capitalist idea. It's making sure that the bottom, if you're going to have a capitalist society, it's making sure the top and the bottom have a flow between them. And this is exactly the opposite of what our leadership is doing. In order to even give us our paltry, I don't call it the trickle-down economy. I call it the tinkles-on economy, because that's what it feels like it's a joke. And so I think now all of a sudden we're realizing we don't have any kind of stability based on a flow, an energy flow, an organic flow of trading between all of us. Rather, we're all dependent on the casino. And if the casino goes down, the Wall Street casino goes down, all of us go down. So this is what we're facing, coming up right on the heels of the pandemic disruption. So that's what I'll say so far.
So the pyramid needs a strong foundation in order for the 1% at the top to have have something to build on, right? So Russell, over to you. Your turn.
Well, I'm thinking of the late comedian George Carlin, who, looking back on it, he was a prophet. He was right about so many things, but he always said, it's a big club and you're not in it. And in 2008, I was still working full time, and I remember the 401s just tanking. And a lot of my coworkers who listened to Fox News and that whole spin cashed in their 401ks because they thought with Obama's election and everything that the whole market was going to tank. Well, they lived to regret that. Okay, now here we are again, years later, and we're in the same boat where the bottom's falling out of everything and the markets are tanking, and they're giving big, huge bailouts, to the top again. Basically, Trump's printing about $6 trillion of new money, which amounts to $20,000 per person in the United States. And out of that, they're throwing us a bone of $1,200, and the rest of it's going to the top. And I'm sure that this time around, it'll be stuffed into executives' pockets as bonuses and whatnot. I remember the excuse they gave in 2008 that, well, these are really talented people that are hard to replace. And that's how they justify them taking millions, and putting it in their own checking account and buying a second yacht. So we're all being fleeced really bad. It doesn't matter to me whether the coronavirus was engineered in a lab or natural. They're taking advantage of the crisis to make themselves a fortune. And unfortunately, this is the stage of capitalism that we're in. It's called disaster capitalism. It's end-stage disaster capitalism, where the people at the top that have more money than any one person should even have everything. And then the people at the bottom have zero. There's a scholar named Nancy McLean that wrote a really good book called Democracy and Change, the Stealth Plan of the American Right for America. And it's a very disturbing book because she reveals all the stealth plans that they have in place. There's even mention of shanty towns for the people that fall through the cracks. But basically what they're wanting is a country of uber wealthy backed by a mighty military, and to hell with the rest of us. And, it's a very disturbing thing to watch happen. So.
Russell, what's the gain of that, of having such disparity? Do they just feel better? They can look their noses down? Is it total, hierarchy? Or, what do they gain by that? Does she go into that? And is that Nancy McLean, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Well, basically, they know, people like the Koch brothers and people of that genre, they know very well that their policies would not be popular if they were upfront with them. So what they're doing there, they passed Citizens United. So all this dark money is coming into our politics now and manipulating everybody. And the plan that they have basically is for the people that already have millions and billions to get the rest of it. You know, they're just like George Carlin said, they're coming for your Social Security. They won't be happy. It's a sickness. It's a hoarding illness that people at the top of the economic ladder suffer from. And also it's an elite club where, like, once you're there and you're paying the $300,000 annual membership for Mar-a-Lago, country club or whatever. I don't know what he charges, but a lot of them charge that much. You start seeing an us versus them mentality. It's like we are the clean people, the good people who have resources, versus the vermin out there, the useless eaters, whose only function is to keep things running and make our fortunes for us. And that's the one aspect of this that I don't think is quite ready for the Illuminati or the cabal or the super rich people that run the world behind the scenes to get rid of everybody right now, because it's not yet automated. When we get to the point where automation can absolutely replace everybody's human labor, that's when the depopulation agenda, if in fact there is one, will really come into play, because they could get rid of us. Right now, they need us. They need the stability. They need us being at our jobs all the time. And it's a little premature, I think, because if everybody tanks and there's only the super rich people, I mean, they're not going to have anybody to do the labor. So,
you're saying that they're going to replace us with AI. And once they have enough sufficient AI, they'll just start getting rid of more and more of us, because we're useless bottom feeders in their minds. And so I guess if you could really anticipate what percentage of humanity they would need to eliminate, but don't they need someone, because they're mentally ill. Hoarders are mentally ill. We had a guest on a couple weeks ago, and we were saying that if they would do their, what do they need? Well, they need to do their therapy. They did their therapy. They might be humanized, they might develop some empathy and compassion, but they're kind of like reptilians. They don't have any ability to feel somebody else. They're such sociopathic or narcissistic personalities that they can't feel other people. They can't feel humanity. And so I think that's what we got with our president. Very narcissistic, and he can't feel other people. He sees other people having emotions, but he can't really feel them, so he kind of fakes it and tries to make it, but he doesn't quite succeed. So I guess what I get from that is you're saying that once they get the AI and they robotize more things, they'll start reducing the population even more. Is that what you're saying, Russell?
Yes, I think that's when the concern for that will come to fruition. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. There's an Israeli author that wrote a best-selling book called Sapiens, but he also wrote an even more interesting book called Homo Deus. And he goes into a lot of detail in that book about when the first artificial general intelligence is created, a human-level AI, that's when the rest of us are suddenly expendable and suddenly obsolete. And it remains to be seen what will happen to the average person when artificial general intelligence, which will soon, Dr. Nick Bostrom from Oxford says that once we create a human-level AI, it'll be anywhere from 2 hours to 18 months before it turns itself into artificial superintelligence, which is an AI that's billions of times smarter than human. Will be the new dysfunctional culture. It's like some people, look at the Amish that way. I don't, but they don't use electricity, and they're kind of, some people see them a little bit behind the times. They're not modernized. But when augmented intelligence comes online, where somebody can actually connect their brain to the internet and have access to all this information automatically, or AGI, artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence, exists in the world, that's when the so-called useless eaters need to look over their shoulder, because they could easily get rid of the entire population except for the ultra rich, and then they'd have a world the way they want it. They want everybody to be ultra rich, and the labor is now produced by AI, so they've got all the material possessions they could possibly ever want, and all the useless eaters are gone. So there is something to these types of conspiracy theories, but I think it's a little premature for the Illuminati or the Cabal to get rid of everybody right now, because they'd sort of be up the creek without a paddle, without people going to work every day and generating where they get their income from. And you got to look at where they get their income from. There's about 8,000 super rich people on the planet that profit from every bullet fired on each side of every conflict on Earth. So the global arms industry, the military-industrial complex, big pharma, the fossil fuel industry, and the world banks are all tied in with this sort of thing. So that's what I tell my friends. I've got dear friends and family who are just absolutely convinced that this is Trump versus the deep state. But I said, if all these elements are the deep state, he's in bed with all of them. He's in bed with the fossil fuel industry, the global arms industry, the world banks, all of it. So when the one comes along, if there ever is a one, he or she will start dismantling this whole apparatus. And that's how they're fighting the deep state. But we're not there.
We'll go into that some more. Yeah. So what is the purpose of existence? I mean, this takes us into the higher level.
Right.
What is life about in the first place? If it's just to come in here and get wiped out, well, we as souls that are supposed to be immortal will go somewhere else, some other planet, some other form, some other avatars. Then the earth will just be a bunch of, I don't know. Some the rich people have to get their money from the poor, right? They have to get their money by sucking money up from lower. So they won't be rich anymore. They'll be rich in what? Money? They won't have their money anymore. But you can't be Amazon Bezos rich without all of us people have been buying all this crap for the last 6, 7, 8 years, right? Okay, I'm going to pass this to Dr. Lessin. I got to get a new cord, honey. Our battery's going down, so let me get up. Go ahead. Take it away.
Okay, so I've resorted to channeling, and lately I've been channeling Sasha and myself. And here's what I predict. Trump ain't gonna go. He's gonna find an excuse to institute martial law, either something that's really happening, a natural disaster, a disease, or he'll manufacture one, and he isn't going, or he'll have, he's already invited foreigners that are on his side to interfere in our election, and he is not going to go. He's not going to step down. You can count on it, according to my channeling. I don't know about channeling, but anyhow, he's going to find a pretext, and even getting rid of Trump isn't going to do any good because they got Cotton Mather, the Vice President Pence and the fundies. What do you do when it's like that? I'll tell you, in anthropology, we say the basic human sanction is nullity. Before AI takes over, we have a chance for a huelga general, a general strike. Don't let him do it. Stop participating in the institutions that are killing everybody. I'll pass it to Karen.
Oh, that's good. Great channeling, Sasha. That's great. So trying to make sense of things when there's a huge dust up, and that's what we're dealing with. There's a huge dust up. There's a lot going on. There's macro issues. There's micro issues. And by that, I mean what's going out in the world, and then what's going out in your own home and in your own life and in your own mind. And part of why I look at that is because it's the battle really is not necessarily out there. The battle is in here. Who am I? Who am I in this grand scheme of things? How do I think of things in such a way that's advantageous? This is kind of what I was thinking about before before I was going to be coming on today. And some of the things I thought about is that, whatever is empowering to yourself, whatever causes you to have clarity so that you are aware of your immediate circumstances and what you need to do is important to focus in on, and not necessarily what's out there. Having grown up and believe me, I know the right-wing agenda very, very well. I was raised in it and then ultimately rejected it. But this might be their intention, But something I realized along the way is that they are afflicted with the human condition too, and it doesn't feel like it, but it's true. Is that who we are and how we empower ourselves with our minds is very important at this time. I think something Russell was talking about, how so many people are, thinking this is, some kind of game between Trump and the deep state. I don't think people realize how many layers and levels involved in supposedly the deep state. Because I'm from the right-wing persuasion, I happen to know that some of the people that are being championed as heroes of this situation are in fact villains themselves and are completely selfish. And that's what I mean about narcissism. Narcissism only gives you one thing, and this is after living under the regime of a lot of narcissists personally and corporately, is betrayal. They're going to act and say, we're going to do this for you. And you're going to say, oh, yay, please save me. And that's a fundamental flaw right there in your thinking, is if you think that you've been waiting around for someone to save you and you don't do what it is that you need to do to get some clarity and to help yourself and to help your neighbors. It's a very important time to do that. Is don't expect this to be what you think it is. There's been underlying things that have been building for years, but they are flawed assumptions because they're assuming things that are not true. These people do not control everything. It feels like they do, but they don't, because there's another player in this game, and that is nature. That is Gaia. That is this planet. That is this organism of which we all are a part. One of the things that coronavirus intelligence does is challenge our assumptions about health and about our bodies. It's challenging the idea, quite possibly, that vaccines that we discovered, Louis Pasteur many hundreds of years ago, is not the answer to everything. There's a term that they use in vaccination called herd immunity. And herd immunity is not just about that we vaccinate everyone and we find a cure. The underlying problem is our overall health has been degraded. But nature can adapt. And so one of the ways we're going to be adapting is very tribal, very natural. And that is, if the whole genome is under threat, there's an intelligence of our bodies, there's an intelligence of evolution, there's an intelligence of things, even like having a psychic sense of what's going on, awareness. These are things that are coming into play. So it's important to tap into that knowledge and knowing. It's very easy to be afraid. Don't be that. Be concerned. Be concerned and be aware. And I know I'm probably jumping the gun on the hope rope there, but I just feel like I needed to say that right now. So go ahead.
Well, I have a question.
Okay. Go ahead, Russell. Go ahead.
Karen, have you ever heard of an author named Frank Schaeffer?
No.
Okay, he wrote a book. He was one of the original founders of the religious right, and he wrote a book called Crazy for God. And he shows up doing he's retired now and paints pictures of Pinocchios. And he does these little videos from his studio that are quite interesting. But yeah, he was one of the original founders. He was very heavily invested in that movement, and then concluded, he realized the underlying flaw in the thinking of this whole thing. And a lot of this is driven by assumptions that are false, but people were taught that they were true as a child. For example, the idea that the Bible, as it is right now, is the inerrant word of Almighty God. Now, this is going to scare a lot of people who are listening possibly, but this is ascertainably false. If you do your research, you can find out that the stories in the Old Testament are rehashed tales from previous cultures. Even a really popular fundamentalist author named Thomas Horn has conceded this. These are tales from Sumer and Egypt and India retold in a different form in the Old Testament. So you can go all the way through the Bible and trace these elements to previous cultures and find out that they're common mythology of the time, Iron Age mythology. It's like the Iron Age Guide to the Cosmos, and unravel this. But if you don't actually dig into it and excavate all these details and get yourself a good biblical concordance and, read the Bible from cover to cover yourself, you're not going to get there, because it's mystified. A lot of people just keep on around the house for a lucky charm, and they'll profess that they believe that, everything in there is absolutely 100% true, because they're scared to say otherwise. They're afraid of the flames of hell if they do. And this has been the common denominator with heretics of all the eras, like Giordano Bruno, that thought there was life on other planets. The church killed him, just for believing there's planets who were populated out there, because that was against their church doctrine. You've got the Inquisition, the Crusades, all kinds of power trips by the elite priesthood that have caused untold human suffering, in the name of God. When Hernando Cortez came up through Mexico, he was on 10% commission by the Spanish crown, and he killed everybody to take their gold. I mean, there's an ugly, dark side to capitalism that people just in this country aren't able to look at, because they've been indoctrinated since birth that this is the patriotic thing to believe in. You're taught to do the Pledge of Allegiance, to sing about bombs bursting in the air. They bring in military aircraft during halftime shows at football games to connect sports with the military, so that when we start bombing people in other countries, as yay team, our team's winning. It's like a big video game that they're watching from their armchair. And the fact is that all of these people that are being bombed all over the world aren't any different than we are. I was going to work one day when I worked full time, and I heard what was actually a tornado siren, but it was kind of a frightening sound. And I thought, what if this was the signal for incoming bombs? How would that make me feel? And it's a terrible, terrible feeling. And the people in other countries, like Syria, that are digging their children out of the rubble, I can't even say enough to my heart goes out to them, because a lot of it's just BS and politics and, people shuffling populations around to make things happen. But I just wondered if you had heard of Frank Schaeffer, because he's an interesting author that does
yes.
videos.
Yes, I had. There was a distortion when you said the name, but yes, absolutely, yes. I know what you're saying.
Okay, and then the other question I have is for Sasha, because Sasha, you mentioned that you were like channeling your higher self. That's exactly what Daryl Anka, that channels Bashar, explained about this entity that he channels. He says this may be an aspect of myself that exists in what we call the distant future, that he's channeling. So it's actually him in the distant future that's coming through when he goes into his trance state. And that actually coordinates with Dr. Nick Bostrom's simulation hypothesis. He thinks that, we're a population from what we call the distant future running ancestor simulations. And then if you check out the raw material, the law of one, there's a data point that correlates, saying that every one of us has a 6th density higher self that exists in what we call the distant future, and that there's a two-way communication channel going on. And even philosopher David Chalmers created the matrix hypothesis, where he said the same thing, that we've got this higher density version of ourselves versus our physical existence, and the purpose of it is like a two-way communication channel. Our physical life here on Earth is providing our higher self in the distant future and higher densities information, and then we're getting information from that person. So it's funny you should mention that, Sasha, because I also have been experimenting with that, of going into meditation and addressing my higher self and seeing if I can get any feedback from it. And that ties into Dr. Helmut Schmidt's retroactive causality, where the future can affect the present and the present can affect the past, and all these timelines, past, present, future, happening simultaneously. And we can access these resources of information from the now that we're currently experiencing. So, yeah, it just depends on how far down the rabbit hole you want to go. These Illuminati or the Cabal people, there's the thinking out there that they're also connected to either positive or negative higher density extraterrestrials, and that the negative extraterrestrials are interested in generating fear because they get some kind of food source from that. And their ultimate goal is planetary conquest, because that's what they do. So it may be that the secret societies and the cabal are actually ultimately at the higher echelons of the leadership, having some contact made with higher density negative extraterrestrials, whereas the positive ETs or interdimensionals, they actually seem to be drawn towards people who request their assistance and request communication. They're the meditators, the light workers, the people that they have sort of what, like Star Trek, the non-interference directive, the prime directive, and they don't intervene and come save everybody, but they're very interested in a calling that goes out. And according to the raw material, the more people you have in a group calling situation, there's a squaring factor that happens where it expands the power of that calling. So if you can get, I know it's not advisable right now to get groups together, but when we can collect groups together, a group meditation or a group calling to higher density entities would probably be very helpful. And that's how you access, those types of entities, because according to the raw material, beyond fourth density, which is the next level up from third density, where we're at right now, they don't even get involved in the dualistic conflict directly. They just use third and fourth density proxies. So both sides of the angelic and the demonic forces, or whatever you want to label them, are looking for recruits, but they have different methodology.
Okay, my turn. You sent me something on Facebook. Why COVID-19 is not a bioweapon deliberately released to call the population, as conspiracy theorists suggest. And so it says, here's the problem with that line of reasoning. They usually means oligarchs or those in high positions of influence and power. Their primary interest is growing their wealth while maintaining security. You need a large and healthy population to have a powerful defense, the military, and a strong economy to both extend your sphere of influence, which is power, security, and wealth, and grow your personal wealth. Therefore, it is not rational to call the population of serfs or chattel or whatever we are to them. That is the key to making them wealthier and more powerful. Doing so is no different than a farmer deciding he has too many heads of cattle, and instead of selling them off, opts to call his herd, losing probably millions of dollars in what he's already invested in them. So this herd immunity, and we're going to be coming up on the break in 2 minutes, this which is the idea that we just let the virus run crazy, infect everybody, and it'll kill off. It's probably more like 10%. They're saying it's 0.1% or 1% or 3 to 4%. But one of my experts the other day said it's probably closer to 10% they're going to kill off. So what do you think of that panel? The idea that they're going to call the population, but it's not logical, but are reptilians logical? My theory is they've sold this planet with all of its resources and minerals to an outside power, somebody off planet, another species, and they got to clear the real estate here so the new owners can take control. With that, I'll pass it to Sasha. We have 1 minute. Just keep in mind that it's 6:56. It goes into the commercial.
Okay, what we really have here is the elite has latched on to the doctrine of the elect, the Calvinistic idea that the rich are blessed by God, and the poor are poor because they ain't blessed and because they're cursed by God. And this is the idea of the family that Trump and Pence belong to, that they are the chosen ones, and they're chosen to kill you.
Aloha, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix, and I'm your host, Janet Carroll Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin, and our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as the Mad Painter, and we are doing an Apocalypso panel with Russell Scott Brinegar and Karen Christine Patrick, and this is Revolution Radio, Studio B. So before we get back to our show, and it is Dr. Lessin's turn, cut off in the middle of the commercial. And we would like to remind you to please go over to revolution.radio to the top left-hand tab, and please go make your donation, because we really rely on your donations to keep this show and channel, Revolution Radio, afloat. So thank you very much. Oh, there's also a another button you can do, the Patreon, and you can set up recurring payment, so it just comes out every month or every week, or however often you want it. So thank you very much. And now back to Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Okay, so we were talking about what is it that makes some people feel for all humanity. And Russell, I think your particular experience about how you can get past dualism and you can get and the fallacy at the past preceded the present, and the present precedes the future, which are merely intellectual aspects of our intellectual minds, and a near-death experience or any kind of a peak experience can free you from this. And meditation is the way Whitley Strieber, in his wonderful new book, A New World, really points out that the other, that is the departed, extraterrestrials, intraterrestrials, and so forth, are most open to those who meditate, and so that's definitely a path. And I also want to call to your attention the book "Winners Take All" by Anand Giridharadas, who basically says, don't be fooled by the cockroach capitalists. These are the people who talk at your TED Talks and say individual success is the way, and you can. And if you don't take care of individual success and working hard and kiss up to the elite, and you're poor, that's your fault. And that's the whole point. Is motivational speakers that say just succeed yourself and the devil take the hindmost are just leading their effective motivational abilities to the cause of getting you killed ultimately. And so it's time to reach out and realize we're all in this together. The dualism is the basic root of and the hierarchy that goes with it of our situation. No one is higher than anybody else. Everybody has their light to shine. Every song is to be sung. Every dream is to be dreamed, and it's the same for everyone. We all have our lights, and everybody's light has a right to shine. And it's time to function as in nullity, to stop supporting this system that's killing everybody and snuffing our lights. I pass.
Karen, your turn.
Well, you were using the word apocalypso. You said was a song. Somebody have to play it for us, Janet. I've been curious about. Someone wrote a calypso song.
I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it. I probably have it for our next time. We'll do another panel in another week or two.
Yeah, we're all dancing the apocalypso
style.
Right, yeah, we're dancing the apocalypso. Well, that word apocalypto, right? It means the revealing. The revealing. A lot of people think it means, the end of the world and the Antichrist and whatever, all kinds of things like that, but actually is revealing. And that's what a crisis does, is it reveals things. So how would we have known that the current administration got rid of the, pandemic panels that would have helped us in this situation? And where'd the money go? That's going to be an interesting thing. We'll need to keep pressuring our representatives. And I do, by the way, highly recommend right now that you contact your representatives as these bills go through, because literally you might be living on whatever it is, paltry stuff that they do give us. So you need to push your representatives toward making sure they bail out the people and not the people at the top. If there's ever a time to get to know your representatives, your state representatives, your federal representative, your senator, your congressman, it is now. But this is revealing. We would not have known many things. There was an alert. So the state of New Mexico, where I live, the governor office, is got an alert system kind of like an Amber Alert. And if your phone's set up, then all of a sudden, like Brett and my phone suddenly were screeching an alarm. And one of the ones we got in the past few days is that the all of the governors are asking for respirators and masks and all kinds of things like that from the federal government. There's a government repository stockpile where all this stuff is supposed to be, stored. And then when New Mexico got its, provision from that, it was 25% less. It was only 25% of what they asked for, and most of it had been stored so long it was destroyed, damaged, compromised. The mice got into it, all kinds of things like that. Another governor discovered when they got the respirators, this is California, when they got respirators from the federal government, most of them didn't work, and they're putting Silicon Valley to work to repair these respirators that might need like 3D parts printed and everything like that. So we're finding out the federal level has been taking in an awful lot of resources in terms of funding from all the states and then returning back hardly anything that's usable in this crisis. So this is revealing. We're having it revealed to us assumptions that we thought we would be taken care of and by the federal government promising all kinds of things. And what that's going to mean is you're going to follow up and you're going to find out it was contractors that were given a contract to produce a certain amount of things, that there was going to be things being stored on our behalf, and it's woefully inadequate. So they're going to, hopefully have follow-up. Follow the money. Where the hell did this money go to for these resources that we now don't have? And so that's an apocalypso. That's revealing. It's also going to reveal, of course, our healthcare system, having been corporately, we pay 4 times as much for the same, level of healthcare, and yet we get a lot less back. Where's all that? Follow the money. Follow the money. Follow the money. This is the only thing at the top they care about. And we're going to have to be vigilant citizens and follow up. Where did these resources go? Otherwise, we won't be able to, if it's possible, and I even hate to use the term benefit from the situation, or benefit from the revealing of the weaknesses of our system. We're finding out that not having a way to keep everyone stable during an emergency. One of the things, the basic income is not, oh, yay, free money. That's not what it's about. It's about having a stability in times of a crisis. Income still keeps coming in. You're able to still pay for food, et cetera, when there are disruptions. I pinched pennies till Lincoln squeaks, and I'm noticing the food budget, the food prices. Yeah, the food prices are going up. I've been a frugal meister since my grandma taught me to be, and my Depression era grandma taught me to be. And, this is why this one-time funding that's going to be coming is going to go straight into trying to get food and medical supplies to people. And there better be something on the tail end of it. I think Bernie Sanders came to the table late on a basic income. Those of us who follow the Andrew Yang campaign know this. But he's saying that there needs to be something every month for, indefinitely. How long is it going to take for us to recover? The economic disruption is likely to be 10 times worse, for lack of any other way to scale the what's going on, than the 2008 financial disaster that we had, which, by the way, caused Brett to lose his house and millions of other people to lose their house. And for me to be cut out of my job that I was doing at the time, my income was lost in the 2008 situation. And of course, they bailed out everyone but the people. And so we better be vigilant with our leaders.
Let me ask you some questions before we get too far down. I want to go a little bit more interactive here. I mean, we never did recover from the 2008. We're still dealing with them trying to take our house. So that went through this whole presidency, and it's still not resolved until now. They, I think what they did this month, and maybe you could clarify it, is because it was on the board that you didn't. They were going to stop all foreclosures and all rent payments. Has anybody seen the whole bill? Are they going to stop people getting their rents? Because a lot of us are mom and pop, and we rent out the spare room or the cottage so we can pay our bills. So what do we do about those situations? And then the other question they have is, a lot of people that were relying on their insurance from their jobs, but we just had 2-3 million people get laid off. And when you get laid off, you no longer have your insurance. So that's proof right there that this job-based insurance system does not work. So I wanted to put that on the table, those two things that you just mentioned, the universal health care or Medicare for all, and the universal basic income, or I call it the universal basic needs economy, and it's just covering needs like a roof over your head and food on the table. What do you need to stay alive? I think that if people had their bottom covered, their needs met, they would still want to work for, to get an iPhone, to have a big screen TV. People, to have a house that has, so many thousand square feet instead of a, one bedroom, right? So what do you guys think of that? We'll put that on the table. And I didn't interrupt you, but I wanted to just address that. Back to you, Karen. We're going to talk about universal health care and the UBI, or the universal basic needs economy. So your turn first, Karen, since I interrupted you.
Yeah, as far as I know on the bill, and I haven't completely read it, what I was hearing was compensations for unemployment, and I have a lot of trouble with implementation concerns, because I think when they implement it, people were calling, for instance, to try to get unemployment insurance, and the lines were jammed. Their capacity to deliver this to us is going to be not very good, because they're not used to giving money to the bottom, so they've not developed those channels. As far as I know, they were trying to concentrate on workers. There was some debate of whether, they would pay for testing or have the vaccine, if there is one, be free. But I know from dealing with the healthcare system as a caregiver for many years, is that they might cover maybe the test, but what about complications? In other words, you start out with coronavirus, I'm finding out people are getting residual lung problems and heart problems and things like that after. Will that be covered? And what's literally happening right now is people are now getting the bills already for having been tested, the few that have been tested. And so it's the implementation, or the devil's in the details, that we're going to have to watch. But as far as I know, it's kind of murky what the people are going to get. They're basing it off of two years ago tax returns, which of course aren't going to do any good if you have no current income like you had 2 years ago. So I think the implementation, whatever they decided to pass, we can guarantee whoever's closest to the spigot, which is going to be the 1%, they're going to be the closest to the front of the line. They're going to get money and dark money and all kinds of support. And what they did last time in the 2008 downturn was they bought stock. They did not give it never trickled down to workers at all, and they bought stock and jacked up CEO pay. So whatever they pass, the implementation of it is something we're also going to have to watch. Anything short of universal health care and a universal basic income and some other provisions to help people stay in their homes. Let's abolish homelessness, for God's sake. Having 500,000 people on the street is a health disaster by itself before you add a virus on top. So these are things that we've got to be looking for coming. This is what we need.
Okay. Russell.
Well, it's interesting that this cycle, we had a candidate that was the first one in history to recommend universal basic income, and he barely was noticed. I think if he were still running, he'd be getting a lot more attention, because after this situation, certainly more people will realize the necessity for something like that. One of the personal things that I've changed in is I used to kind of poo-poo doomsday preppers, and it's like they're not so crazy anymore, because this pandemic thing could actually happen anytime. And it's just good common sense to have a stockpile of food, and supplies, so that you don't have to, like in the current situation, for me to go down to Kroger, I have to wear a mask. Now, I did go in there the other day, and I was the only one in there wearing a mask, so people are not taking this thing seriously. But the good news is my plant-based products and gluten-free stuff is popping out at me in the shelves, because everything else is gone. And it's like the stuff that nobody wants. It's the stuff I have to eat, so I just go around collecting my stuff real easy, so it's made shopping easier. And another observation is the focus on toilet paper that people have. Do they not realize that much of the world doesn't even use toilet paper? I mean, you can go into a 5-star motel in a lot of parts of the world, and there's a bowl of water there. You just dip your left hand in there and clean your rear end, you know. And they don't even use toilet paper. So the fact that people were stockpiling toilet paper is just kind of hilarious in some way, because there's other ways to do that, you know. I saw a really creative idea where a guy ran his handheld shower underneath the seat on the toilet and created a bidet. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do that would not make toilet paper such a priority. But fortunately, Kroger has limit 1 now. Julie sent me in for Kleenex, and I didn't know which style she wanted, the long box or the square box, so I got 2. And when I got up to the cashier, she goes, "We're only allowing 1." She says, "I hate to tell people that, you know, and especially in this country. But yeah, you can only buy 1 box of Kleenex at a time now, because they were out of paper products completely." So this is a big wake-up call. It's a big shot of reality right straight into the jugular vein of the necessity for basic income to keep, even if you're total capitalist, to keep the system in place. People have to be able to pay certain things, you know, if a situation like this comes about. Because right now, we're in the eye of the hurricane. We've been punched in the gut. We're watching our IRAs disappear. We have an immediate need for cash. And Donald Trump's making sure that he's signing all the checks. So we'll connect the money with his name come election time. And it will run out very quickly. And then there's going to be more needed. So I don't know how they're going to respond to that. And I think once the initial shock is over, and people get their checks and it's gone, and they're still, you know, about to close their business down or about to foreclose on their house, I foresee I hate to say this, but I foresee little pockets of discontent happening in the country. I think there's going to be some backlash over this whole situation. And one of the things that I noticed, too, I turned 65 this September, and I'm being barraged both on television and through the mail to talk me out of my traditional Medicare for a private Medicare health insurance plan. Don't do that, whatever you do. I've worked in nursing homes for 22 years now, and the difficulty we had in getting payment for clients and patients was the ones that had the privatized Medicare, the Advantage privatized Medicare plans, because they require pre-certification. They kick you off therapy too quick, and they require daily notes. And I mean, it's just a real pain in the rear. And if somebody comes in and they have traditional Medicare with a private Medicare supplement to cover the 20% that Medicare B doesn't pay, you know, they're good. You know, this could be Blue Cross Blue Shield or Anthem or whatever you want to do for the supplement. It's not very much per month to buy a supplement. And also, just so people realize this, there's a learning curve to retirement. Right now, you can still retire at 62, but there's a donut hole health insurance-wise between 62 and 65. You've got to scramble to find some way to cover yourself with health insurance. If you retire at 62 and you don't qualify for Medicare until 65, there's 3 years. You're going to have to either risk it and go without, or pay through the nose, you know, for a private health insurance plan. And right now I'm on, she can retire in May, but she's going to work through August until I can get on Medicare so I can stay on her insurance at work. So the mobility issue is huge, because you got to ask yourself the question, how many people are in jobs that they hate? And people who hate their jobs are not very good at their jobs. They're not very productive or useful in their jobs because they've already started a family and they don't want to lose their health insurance. The health insurance piece of the living puzzle here in this country needs to be mobile. That health insurance needs to go anywhere you go. And that way, people can gravitate from jobs that they hate into something that they love and they'll be good at, which will result in more productivity and better for all of us. And, you know, the most important resource that we have as a world, or specifically as a country, is the intelligence that exists in our population. And that's why, personally, I'm an advocate for universal education, because genius can be found in the ghettos. You know, people that are accidentally into socioeconomic disadvantage their genius will never be realized unless they have easy access to education. And they're not even socialized to go to college. They become drug dealers or, black marketeers. And there's business geniuses in the illegal criminal world. And they're doing that mainly because lack of education. Then they wind up in prison. And guess what they do in prison? They let you have an education finally. So it's sad that you got to beat somebody's mailbox to death, which is a federal crime, and wind up in jail, in order to get an education. So there's a lot of things about this societal structure in this country in particular, with the aversion that at least half the population has against anything that smacks of socialism. That's a stumbling block. That's a mule on the train tracks that's really holding back some really good policies that we could implement that would make our whole society function much smoother. You got the social safety net there at the bottom, whether it's $1,000 a month or $1,200 a month or whatever. Like Andrew Yang said, it's capitalism from $1,000 a month instead of capitalism from zero. And we've just found out with this pandemic that capitalism from zero winds up with a whole country full of destitute people, and that cannot lead anywhere good.
Right. Our job is to be consumers. In order to be consumers, we have to have money. The money's not going to, the poor people only get $1,000 a month. That's not going to do much more than maybe cover the rent. Look at the rent anywhere. You can even get a bedroom for $500 and renting in a group home, right? So the basic $1,000 is going to go to meet their needs. It might even not be enough for that. So we could evaluate these systems and say, what does it cost to live in a life where just your basic needs are met? I agree with there shouldn't be any billionaires until the basic needs of every human being alive is met. And then once that is calculated, that's X. What does it cost to live in a basic, maybe a bedroom will be the standard, and have a flip phone instead of a designer phone, right? I mean, there's some kind of formula that can be calculated, and then that gets met. And then that's like the bottom. That's zero. That's not, that you're like some kind of capitalist and you're going to hoard all the money because you're greedy and how can you live your life when other people don't even have their basic needs met? That, to me, looking at like an alien, looking at humanity, it's like, what are you doing? You're not even meeting the basic needs of your citizens, of your planet. How barbaric. I'm going to give this to Sasha, and then the very last half hour of the show, I'll let you say what you're going to say. I'd like to cover like these socialism, capitalism, communism. What is the best system of governance for the planet? Go ahead, Sasha. You do your segment.
Okay, so before the break, I didn't get a chance to really tell you that you should get a book called Overlords of the Singularity, Russell's book, because it's got in there a formula. He'll tell you the story, I hope, after I'm through introducing it. But what you do is you transcend the intellectual dualism inherent in causal thinking, which is merely a function of our brain, and you look at how the whole thing functions. What the two-slit experiment showed, where you can take a wave and you see what particles it separates into once you run through two slits. When they set up a camera at the beginning, before the wave go through the slits, they found that the conditions of the origin before it goes through the slits, before the wave goes through the slits, is changed, so that the past and the future are flexible. They're merely artifacts of dualistic thinking, which is not letting us see the whole thing. And so when you meditate, or when you almost die and come back, or use a theogenic assistant, you can understand and immediately grok or comprehend or be one with the fact that it's all connected. Everything is connected with everything else. And once you're doing that, then you're free of the trap of causal thinking, which ultimately leads to this hierarchy, which is messing us all up. And so what I would like to hear very much is, Russell, if you would just tell me what your experience, and just before you do that, everybody, when this program's over, I want you to imagine that you died and that you went before a committee, a karmic committee,
and the questions that were asked of you is, what love did you share and what did you learn?
Okay, so this is my request that we talk about what is the best governance system. To me, obviously, our American democracy, or whatever we want to call it, republic, has failed miserably. And it looks like it's ending up being a dictatorship. We've allowed one party to take over all the branches. They're taking over our the legal system. And it's just not working out. It's just not. You just look at the whole system, it's not working out. And then people are going, socialism, capitalism, communism, and they're just like, it's a bunch of dirty words. They're calling you dirty words. And no solutions, no answers, no resolutions. What is the best system, or is it a combination of systems, or is it something that we haven't even thought of to govern this planet, which is in chaos, absolute chaos? Karen.
I'm glad you loved that one. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm lobbing you the talking stick. Go for it.
The talking stick. Okay. Well, we have a negative, somewhat permanent hierarchy in this system of governance from thousands and thousands of years ago. You guys talked about the Anunnaki quite a bit on that. And what my guides have told me for years, and I didn't believe them, is that we're going toward a holarchy. All of us are whole beings that have a lot of capacity that we need to unlock within ourselves and unlock within each other. And we're also part. We're all part with each other. The bottleneck, obviously, when I talked earlier about the federal government, that's the bottleneck. That top-down expectation is not working for us. It's obvious. It was more obvious to some of us who noticed it because we were dealing with systems that aren't functioning. And now I think the evidence, is in front of us to where we can talk to almost anybody about expecting, when someone at the top, is the one that's going to give you something, they're going to siphon off, their cut before you ever get it. And it's going to be, this needs to change. The technology we are getting in a positive sense would allow us to have, for instance, universal education. There's no reason to have top-down education. We have the whole entire world of knowledge literally in our pockets now. We need to unleash that. We need to support that. It's interesting to me as a 20-year veteran homeschooler that a lot of parents are homeschooling for the first time. In New Mexico, they will not be having schools open back up this year, for this whole rest of the school year. So now we've all sent to our rooms to think about what we've done. We're all getting a timeout, which is going to allow us to think very differently about what are we going to participate in once we're on the other side. I expected at some point with applied technology that the technological unemployment is going to be on a mass scale. Their jobs simply, some of them won't come back. And that's something that could be looked at very badly, or it could be looked at as an opportunity. If we have our basic needs met, what would we do with our extra time? Some people are going to volunteer. Some people are going to help other people and kids and old people and disabled people and animals and stuff. I mean, we're going to be rethinking everything. And the opportunity is there. A crisis is a danger plus an opportunity. The opportunity is there to completely rethink from the inside out how we can build a more fair, equitable, and just society that is failing right now. A big, fat, huge, giant fail. So this is our chance to think things very differently than we have in the past and to support each other.
Okay, excellent. Do you have any feedback or comments?
Russell's turn.
Okay, Russell, your turn.
Okay, I want to kind of combine what I've heard from Sasha and yourself, Janet and Karen. from the inside out ring a bell with me, because there's two sources that I would recommend for anybody to immediately become familiar with. Number one, there's a podcast between Michael Shermer, who's one of the high priests of material reductionism, or what they call physicalism. This is a scientific paradigm that's based on Newtonian physics, in which they view consciousness as an epiphenomena of the physical brain. And in that paradigm, they've got something called the hard problem of consciousness that they're grappling with, because they don't know how, when you rearrange inanimate particles, that mind and consciousness and qualia, like the taste of vanilla, can come out of that. And the answer is it can't. And right now, we're at a paradigm shift in the scientific community. But the podcast is between Michael Shermer, he's of the Skeptic Society and all that, with cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman, who's written an excellent book called The Case Against Reality. And basically, Donald Hoffman sat there with Michael Shermer and told him that his whole concept of space and time is doomed. It's a really important conversation for people to listen to right now, because basically we're living, as Sasha said earlier, through the double slit experiments that have been known. The results of this have been known for 100 years now, with the advent of quantum mechanics back in the 20s, with Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein and all the founders of quantum mechanics. We've known kind of in the back of our minds that we live in an observer-dependent reality for 100 years now, but it hasn't taken root in mainstream science. And part of the political problem is that people are living according to this old paradigm where this is the only life that you have, and when you die, you're dead. Therefore, you should just go for the gusto and acquire as much pleasure and happiness as you can, because this is the only show in town. Now, there's a fellow named Dr. Bernardo Castro that's written an excellent book called The Idea of the World, and he's got a lot of excellent YouTube videos. Dr. Bernardo Castro explains it very eloquently in The Idea of the World. What they've been looking for is something called the ontological primitive, the underlying nature of reality, the underlying building blocks of reality. And we've gone from physicalism to something that Dr. Jacques Vallée, who's heavily involved in ufology, did on a TED Talk, which was called pan-computationalism. And what Dr. Jacques Vallée said was that behind and connected to physical reality is a metaphysical reality of informational structures. So that was a midpoint that a lot of scientists have been arriving at in the last 10 or 20 years, where the ontological primitive, the underlying nature of reality, was information, pure information. Well, that doesn't really work, because that's sort of like saying that the smile of the Cheshire Cat exists without the Cheshire Cat. There's something deeper than that. So what Dr. Bernardo Castro come along and did, and The Idea of the World, and other books that he wrote a book called Why Materialism is Baloney. The way he looks at it is that we are all disassociated alters living within a conscious, universal, cosmic mind, that even within one human brain, dissociative personality disorder has become a scientific fact. It was poo-pooed for a while, but they've got a case in Germany where one of her alters was blind, and when that alter took over her brain, she had no activity in her optic nerve. So it's even possible within the same physical brain for there to be two alters that are unaware of each other, or aware of each other somewhat, or don't even like each other, that take over from time to time. So the way that Dr. Bernardo Castro explains it is that we're all a different version of one another. We're all disassociated alters within a cosmic mind. And if everybody understood that I am you and you are me and we are all together, just like the Beatles song, I think the political structure that would emerge from that would function just fine. I used to say that any political system, communism, socialism, capitalism, would work just fine if people were better, because there's always a human element in any of these political structures that screws things up. I've taken the time personally to read all of Karl Marx's works, and he's somebody that's demonized in this capitalist country, is terrible. But I like to make up my own mind, so I actually read the Communist Manifesto and I listened to Capital very carefully. And he lived in the 1800s where kids were being exploited to work 16, 20 hours a day. That's how we get the term up all hours. And he didn't like that. He didn't like that the poor was exploited by the wealthy. And Soviet communism was not what Karl Marx had in mind at all, because in Soviet communism, you had an elite group of capitalists that owned a monopoly on all of the businesses, and they were the elite whose kids went to private schools, and they lived lives of opulence while the peasants, made nothing. So that was not the structure that he outlined in any of his works. And then you've got laissez-faire capitalism, where everybody's on their own and there's no social safety net. The old just die, and the lame and the disabled, well, you push them off a cliff, they just die. And the only people that function are those who are able-bodied and able-minded. That's why it's based on the ableism fallacy. And then socialism, you've got the element of social loafing. The fear is that people get $1,000 a month. There's going to be people that don't want any more than that, and they just kind of live off the system. And that element does exist. But if people realized what Donald Hoffman and Dr. Bernardo Kastrup and other of these idealist scientists, it's called idealism, and that's the new scientific paradigm called idealism, where we're all disassociated alters of one another, and the ontological primitive, instead of being inanimate matter, is consciousness itself. The consciousness and mind are the basic fundamental building blocks of reality. Now, there's a version of that where it's a form of idealism where they're saying some of the subatomic particles are conscious agents. And when you assemble it all together, that mind and consciousness comes out of that, because it's the sum total of the conscious agents, particles, that make up the creature. And this even extends into other species, a grubworm, a dog, a squirrel, a fox. They're all disassociated alters within an infinite cosmic mind or a probability field. And if you adopt that way of looking at things, things change on a heart level, because if you look at other people as a different version of yourself, suddenly all the scriptures make sense. Whatever you do to the least of these, you've done unto me. Take care of the orphans and widows. Treat foreigners as family. Foreigners in your land as family. And you look at the way that we treat foreigners. We've demonized them as the other. And they're just people, just like us, trying to escape from a very dire circumstances. And a lot of it has to do with the climate changes, because in Guatemala, they've had a drought for like 3 years. So a lot of these refugees coming up on the border escaping farming failures, and we should have a lot more compassion towards these people than what we're doing by stripping the children from the mothers, never to be found again, and keeping them in cages that are operated by private companies, Trump's buddies, that charge $700 a day for each refugee. So somebody's making a ton of money off of the refugee situation at the border. So it's going to require an inside-out change of thinking, change of paradigm. And the recommendations that I made for the podcast between Michael Shermer and Donald Hoffman, or the audio version of Dr. Bernardo Kastrup's book, The Idea of the World, are two really good pieces of the puzzle here. And I'm going to actually, even though I've listened to the audiobook of Dr. Kastrup, I'm going to get a printed version, because it's so terminology rich that I'm going to have to go through the printed version and highlight everything. I did a lot of Googling as I was listening to the audio version of it, but there's all kinds of new terminology that everybody that's really wants to be up on all this stuff should know. And another author is
He's saying his last name is
Sherman.
K. How do you spell his last name? Castro.
Okay, it's Dr. Bernardo Kastrup, Kastrup. And
Kastrup.
Yeah, his book, The Idea of the World, dispels every single physicalist argument that's ever been thrown at the concept that the underlying nature of reality is consciousness itself. So that'll improve our politics, because if people act like they're going to live here in this physical life forever, and they're not, most of their stuff, when they pass on, and go back to source or go to the other side or however you want to look at it, is given to other people. And then they adopt it and they think that they're going to live forever, and it's like 150,000 people a day incarnate onto planet Earth, and approximately 300,000 incarnate and 150,000 exit. So we're actually there's a double number of new incarnations than there is people exiting. But if you look at it from a macro standpoint of the whole planet Earth, this planet's operating like an internal combustion agent with entities coming and going constantly. So the real nature of reality is that this life is not permanent. It's temporary. People come and go here. And the other piece of the puzzle is Edgar Casey, in his channeling of the Akashic Records, talked a lot about an ancient Atlantean technology called the Firestone that enabled a channel of communication between the incarnate world and the discarnate world. And we've lost that. People that are enmeshed in physicalism don't even think that the other side exists, that there is no afterlife, there is no eternity, that this is it. And that's not true. And it's not true on a scientific level now with the new paradigm of idealism. So people need to get with it. The memo was put out 100 years ago that we live in an observer-dependent sort of a virtual reality system here. And a lot of people didn't get that memo, and they're still tied up in the idea that the basic building blocks of reality is inanimate matter, and that's not even possible.
I'm going to pass to Sasha. Are you finished, Russell?
Yeah.
Are you complete?
Okay. So in terms of your dissociated personality being seen in others in Jungian psychology, and I'm a student of Hal and Sidra Stone, so I've been really immersed in this. What you judge in other people is the parts of yourself that you haven't fully accepted. When you fully accept parts of yourself, you can see what they really need and work it out ecologically. So if you're of anger, if you're angry, instead of saying, oh, I can't be angry, I have to be loving, you say, angry part, what is it that you need? And your angry part will tell you something. Well, I need to assert myself appropriately or something like that. And usually these parts have to do with the way you learn to protect your vulnerability when you were a child and very, very dependent. So anything you judge in other people or in yourself for that matter really just is a projection of yourself. And once you realize it all comes out of you, you can be at peace with other people. And that's the way you transcend dualism. You embrace the opposites within you, and you can feel oneness with all the apparent opposites, because the opposition to are both poles of a dimension. And you need, if you can expand to both of them, then you free yourself from the trap of dualism, me versus you, or parts of me versus other parts of me. It's there. All you got to do is just learn, if I'm judging someone else, what in me is being triggered, and say, what does that part need? And then when you realize, oh, the other person is just being themselves, and I'm resonating in a certain way, I'm causing my own feelings. No one else is causing them. And so we got to look at the greedy trumps within us and realize, yeah, we like, you got to balance pride and humility in this particular case, not be all pride like the trumpets. Okay, I pass.
Karen.
I guess the thing screaming in my brain right now is scarcity isn't real. Scarcity is manufactured. It's something that we're programmed to believe, but it isn't real. And that's important to know at the time when there's disruptions in the supply lines. I know that's going to be the hardest thing to know. But if we understand that scarcity is manufactured, it's the number one manufactured thing of the United States, as a matter of fact, because somebody benefits by it. If we realize that there is abundance right available to us and start looking for it and support each other finding it, that's going to get us through this and beyond, because there is enough housing. There's 13 houses for every homeless person. There's the ability to do all kinds of things But if we believe it's scarce, then we're going to run and we're going to hoard and we're going to believe this stupid idea again. There's more than enough knowledge. There's more than enough wisdom. There's more than enough of everything. And there's more than enough of us. The most important thing is don't sell yourself short. Don't sell yourself incapable. Don't wait for a savior. You are your own savior. Start looking to your own inside of yourself for the infinite source and connection to energy that you can bring into your situation and to other people. Sometimes it's easier to bring it to other people because you can see that person's need. You can reach out to them. It's sometimes harder to reach out and support yourself. So this is the main thing is look every day. Don't try to do too much, but look every day, as one person said, for the helpers. And the biggest one is yourself. Don't buy into the scarcity. Don't buy into the fear. Deal soberly with what is in front of you. Be wise. Be intelligent. Think it through. But don't sell yourself short, most of all. It's from the outside in. If we get this, everything will change. Everything will be transformed.
Karen, you said there's 13 houses for every homeless person. Where do you get that? I'm just going into town here. There was millions of houses that were foreclosed on and that are empty. And if what the scarcity was created by the banks in conjunction with real estate in order to bring, so if for the banks to be involved in the sale of a property, there has to be the demand higher than the supply. So they artificially created, taking many, many houses off the market in order to prevent people from having access to them. So you've got to look at where, who's benefiting from this. If we actually had a real economy and we had price discovery and we didn't have the banks able to control and manipulate this, you'd be able to buy a house for a couple $1,000s. The problem is they took them off the market in order to have, ramp up the prices of what's left and charge people, a whole bucket load of interest for it. And the source of, our economic problems in terms of housing and so many other things, what I would recommend people is to go into the basic income movement philosophical discussion groups, because this is being talked about. How did we get artificial scarcity in so many of our basic needs? Is because somebody is benefiting from it and manipulating it. And if we have justice and we get rid of that manipulation and people go occupy houses, there's some women who are with their children are occupying houses and they get thrown out, but they're still trying to do that. It is that there's tons of empty space. There's empty malls that could have apartments in them. There's empty strip malls and buildings all over the country that are empty. So this is the thing: is we've got to remove. They could be housed. Get people out of the weather, out of the heat, out of the cold. House them, Allow them to. Running out of time.
Social distance. Yeah, allow them to do their own social distancing.
Right. Okay, I'm going to pass this to Scott for the last round here. We have about 4 minutes left. Go ahead, Scott, and then Russell. Russell Scott. Okay, Russell, and then Sasha. You do one last minute. Okay, go ahead, Russell. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'm going to address something that I heard Dr. Lessin say about what we're critical of in others is stuff we don't like in ourselves, and I have to confess that is true in regards to my own feelings about President Trump, because we did that one show on the dangerous case of Donald Trump where 37 psychologists identified that he was an egomaniac, a malignant narcissist, a pathological liar, and all that. And those are things that I have identified long ago in myself that I'm trying to overcome. There are things about myself I don't like. And it bothers me that someone who openly displays all the characteristics of what I don't like about myself has risen to being in charge of the country. there's just a very disturbing element of that those characteristics that I don't like in myself that I see reflected in Mr. Trump, and that's the source of my criticism for him. It's just because I see those things that in myself, and I don't think they're good. So when I see them in another person, I see them rise to a position of prominence. I mean, he openly violates every scripture on the planet, every spiritual teaching on the planet he openly violates. And it's disturbing that the evangelical community, who are lost in this prosperity theology, like Dr. Lessin was talking about, where they equate wealth with godliness, and they get on TV and tell people to double their tithes during this pandemic and all that to enrich their own coffers. They've hitched their wagon with the wealth worship of Donald Trump. And people who aren't really well read within the spiritual traditions don't even understand how far away from Christ's teachings that actually is. And they're connecting the evangelicals, the prosperity theology evangelicals, with Trump as the godly head of the evangelicals. And if you're critical of the TV evangelists and the hucksters on TV and the evangelicals and Trump, then you're critical of Jesus. So they write you off as some godless heretic. And it's really strange how that works, because there's a whole domino effect of connections that they've made in their mind. They're just patently false. I'll pass.
Okay, last minute to you, Sasha.
Everything's going to be okay, one way or the other. What we're learning is we're all in this together. We're a bunch of primates on a blue spinning ball. And we all breathe the air, and we all get radioactivity from our bombing of the Marshall Islands. It's still happening, and we all love each other, even though we may express it in really hateful ways. And it's a glorious time to be alive. It's a challenge. It's a chance to be yourself and really dig it, because this is it. This is your shot. Go for it.
That I want to thank Russell Scott Brinegar, Karen Christine Patrick, myself, Janet Lessin, Dr. Sasha, Alex Lessin, and our producer Thomas Becker, also known as the Mad Painter. You have been listening to Revolution Radio, the Sacred Matrix on Studio B, and we'll be back again on Tuesday with Stargate to the Cosmos. Say something, Sasha. We're waiting for the music.
Something.
There's the music. Thank you. It's loving this. And aloha.
Aloha.